Welcome to the International Schools Podcast. I am your co-host, John Mickton. Lovely to be here again. One of the things that I think all of us in schools, and actually even in companies, there's this infamous word called innovation. And now you have all kinds of roles: Chief Innovation Officer, technology and innovation, teaching and learning and innovation. And this word innovation has become quite prominent in the vocabulary of education and schools. And especially in K-12 schools, there's a lot of thought about this idea of innovation and what does it mean and how does that change kind of the dynamic of the value-added proposition of schools. We're very much tied to bells and structures in 45 minutes and 90 minutes. Many schools have the pressure of exams, be it AP, IB, IGCSE. So there are a lot of creative tensions that kind of force schools to comply. And of course, if you're in a private school or a international school, often you have clients, which are our parents and the larger community, and they have points of reference. They want to make sure that their children are successful and maybe go to a good university, so they need to have good results. Amongst all this, of course, schools try to innovate and be creative and try to understand that in the world that we live in, there's a certain agility and innovation that's required to really address some of the existential issues that we're all facing, be it climate change, be it the geopolitical landscape, or even the implementation and use and seamlessness of artificial intelligence that's showing up not only in schools, but in children's homes. So one of the things that we thought would be super interesting is to reach out to some educators that are really working in this sphere. And we connected with the New England Innovation Academy, which are based in Boston. And Durga and Camp both are our guests today, and I'm going to turn over to them so they can quickly introduce themselves and give us a context about the school. And then we're going to dig into this conversation about innovation, because both of them are really quite committed to that. And if you go to the website, and again, remember the show notes, both Camp and Durga have put some resources there, and you have the website and their LinkedIn connection. So it might be nice to pop over there and kind of look at the website and see some of the missions and values and approaches that both they're leading in their roles within the school. Durga and Camp, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I'll turn over you to Durga if you just introduce yourself, and then over to Camp, and then maybe a quick framing of about this school.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Durga Suresh-Menon. I am the head of school. I am in my 5th month as head of school. So you'll hear a lot more context and depth about our school from Camp. But as still a very objective observer of New England Innovation Academy, I always say we put innovation in our name, which means that we cannot run away from it. This cannot be a fashion statement or something that you can say and get away with. We have to be very intentional about what that actually means. And for us, it means on a grand scale that it is something novel, and a school that says that we are innovative in everything that we do. And then there is also an element of constantly having to prove it. And I'm hoping that in this conversation, you will ask us those questions, and we'll tell you a little bit more about New England Innovation Academy. My background is in higher education. I come from 25 years of being a college professor and a dean. And so I understand the importance of K-12 education and the importance of learning innovation, understanding innovation before you get to college, so you're prepared for college.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Camp.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm a founding member of NEIA. So NEIA is a startup school. We're in our 5th year, and I've been around since the very beginning. I joined in February of 2021 before we opened our doors in September of 2021. And part of the reason I'm here is the fact that we call ourselves New England Innovation Academy. One of our taglines way early on that I still believe in strongly is that we strive to be the school the world needs next. And what that means is it needs innovative thinking. So yes, innovation is technology, AI, novel things, but it's also a way of thinking. And that's how we have to approach really everything we do when we have a name like New England Innovation Academy, and when we have a mission to rethink how education should be.
I really like the idea that you've put your own pressure and accountability by putting the name in the name of the school. And so, and I think so often we have this issue where people put labels and words. If you look at many schools, they all have missions about resilience and creativity, but sometimes you go in and everybody's in rows and doing exams. And so it's interesting that you're challenging your own selves as leaders, but your community with this idea. If we have innovation, we actually have to deliver on that. So on that idea, when you think about innovation in schools, and especially in the K-12 environment, what does that really mean beyond that word, the buzzword of innovation? Is it about new tools? Is it mindsets? Or is it something deeper? And I'll let either of you start.
I thought about it before, and I thought about this question, like, what does innovation mean? And you just said new tools, mindset, or something deeper. The answer is yes. It's all of them. It's not one thing. I say that you have to be innovative. We are a boarding school as well, and we have junior boarding. You have to be innovative in your boarding program, right? And to me, I'll let Cam talk about the teaching learning side of it. To me, I think of innovation in a campus like ours, that it is the amount of intentionality that goes behind creating something new, right? We have to be inclusive, right? And these days, tradition is what people know of, and we are trying to buck tradition here. And in that way, it's an innovative form of 6 through 12 education where we are trying our best not to be traditional. We are not into summative assessments. I like the way you said it, where everybody sits in a row and somebody's just walking around. We are fighting to be not that, right? We are teaching entrepreneurship and teaching entrepreneurial mindset, right? It's not just about come learn and you can start a business. No, it's about scaling forward. What does that actually mean? We are big on human-centered design. And every time I say human-centered design, people look at it as two different things. One is human-centered and one is design thinking. But human-centered design is putting the human in the middle of creating design, why design is created. And I think that's what innovation here at New England Innovation Academy is. And Camp, you could talk about the teaching learning part.
Can I just ask you quickly, you said we're bucking tradition. So Camp had told us your school's 5 years. Give me an example of some traditions that you have decided are non-negotiable, you won't engage with.
Sure. So one way is we have a competency-based assessment system, which there are many places that do competency-based assessment, but how we do it is very unique in terms of we've taken many different assessment systems together and merged them into what we believe is best, and we operate that as an entire school. That's how we assess students. We assess them on competency, so they don't get, say you take a math quiz or you do a presentation, you don't get a B or a 75 or a 93 on that. You get assessed on competencies on that assessment. So it takes away a little bit of the traditional, like, oh, I get a certain grade on this. We still funnel those competencies into a course grade. So a student has a traditional course grade, but how you go about getting that is very non-traditional. That's something that's non-negotiable for us in terms of how a student learns and experiences the skills we want them to leave NEIA with.
So those competencies that you're talking about, that you're measuring students in the different contexts, you said presentation or a math quiz, are these competencies based on something from an external source, or these you sat together as a school because you're one of the founding members and you came up with this vision and values and you said, these are the competencies that we really believe are essential in our mission?
Sort of both. The founders of the school, our board members, had created sort of a portrait of a graduate, and they were in 5 buckets. And that's literally where we started from to shape our competencies. But one thing about being innovative is every single year we iterate that system. If one of the competencies doesn't get hit as much, we examine why and we replace it if necessary, or we change the wording because it's about being relevant in those competencies. We're not just resting on, oh, our founders wanted this type of competency. We have to make sure that's being used in practice and we evaluate that. Whereas I've been independent schools for 31 years, and that's something that does not happen very often at all. You just kind of do with the inertia that's there, and we refuse to do that.
So it's really about having this agility to move and adapt as the different creative pressures come in, and being agile enough that you're willing to do that. I then am wondering, schools are often expected to innovate, that especially, the private schools and international schools, that's one of the things. We are not bound often by a board of education or politics. We have much more agency. Okay, there's a board of governors and their trustees, but there tends to be some agency. While also we're doing this innovation, there is also an expectation, and I think usually from parents, and correct me if I'm wrong, or even from students or teachers, to protect the stability in a tradition. And so I'm wondering how you personally think about holding those two together. You want to innovate, but you still need to learn how to read and do the maths and have some basic science. But how do you balance that, and how do each feed into each other?
I'll jump in first, and then Durga can talk from her perspective. So one thing I would say, I teach humanities. And so when I'm talking to prospective families and students, I say, you're going to learn to read and write and communicate. Those are the essential skills and competencies within humanities that we value and that are traditional. Those go across the base of any type of quality humanities course, but it's how you do it. So I like how you said there are certain things that need to be learned in science or in math. Like, yes, they do. There are, and we teach those. We just innovate how we teach them, or we don't follow any prescribed, like you have to have a certain type of test or quiz or something like that. That we're always thinking about how it is that we are going to take some of those traditional concepts that people definitely want and innovate with those. So we're not always just creating new curricula or new areas to focus on. We're taking the traditional things and being relevant and future focused with them. So Durga, maybe talk about from your perspective as head of school, how you see it.
I was going to say, I come from higher education where innovation is so hard. It is so steeped in tradition, and it's so steeped in what we have held on to 100 years. So in NEIA, what I look at, and Camp, you kind of touched upon this, is we are a private school, which basically means that you are completely right, John. We are not bound and pulled down by a state-wide mandate or a federal mandate. We're not bound by those. However, do our students go to college? Yes, they do. Do they go to the best colleges in the world? Yes, they do, right? So when I came in as a new person, I asked Camp, I said, so the core is still math, science, reading, writing, application of innovation. We have something called as Innovation Studio, where we actually let our students have inquiry-based research, inquiry-based projects, right? And it's all about asking the right questions and not just seeking answers. We teach entrepreneurship that talks about mindset. We teach AI that talks about implicit bias, right? It's deep education. But, and then I put a big but we don't put ourselves in a box, because there is that continuous improvement cycle. And it's wonderful to start as a head of school in the summer. So I started when school was done. Right? So I saw how these educators came together and they reflected upon the year that happened. And one of the first offsite meetings I attended was with the leadership team in academics. He calls them the academic leadership team. And they go on an offsite and they kind of debrief the whole year. What worked? What didn't work? What can we change? Right? Where did our students succeed? And where were their challenges, and what can we do? And again, innovation is easy if you have a North Star. And our North Star is the student experience, right? And how we prepare the student. And I love the way you said, you talk about what is next, the future school for what is needed, for whatever is next, right? And so that is the ethos of how we create our education every single year. And if something doesn't work, so the beauty of being a startup, and we're very proud to call ourselves a startup, is we are not driving a tank. We are driving a bicycle. If something doesn't work, we chuck it and we reinvent. And so that's the beauty of being, and I like to say this, that as a school of innovation and entrepreneurship, we are a market of one to me, right? We are not steeped in this market of competition, but it's like, who can be more traditional? We are not one of those people.
And I think this is interesting that you're saying is because you're so young and you have that capacity for agility and kind of that startup mentality, it gives you this opportunity to be kind of reflective and have this irritative process. Now I'm wondering, of course, all schools, private schools, being very candid here, need bums on seats, right? You are in New England, you're in the Boston area. It's many very prestigious private schools and famous schools. When you are, when parents are driving around and deciding to spend money on a school for their child, they're very likely also, it's a bit of a gamble. They want to make sure that investment, there's going to be a return. And often their point of reference is their own experience, which very likely was a private school that was very academic, maybe test driven, and they got good results and they went to a good university. I'm wondering, how do you try to sell this to a parent that's used to a far more traditional experience and their points of reference are very traditional and they're looking for a replication of that as they walk around? They don't want to see a big circular room with a bunch of bean bags and be like, what is this? This is not a school. What, as a leader, how do you kind of come to terms and not appeasing people, but trying to make them understand that there is value and there is something so unique and essential about this approach?
That's a great question. And I am an independent school parent. My child is very young. She can't yet go to NEIA. And so I understand the importance of this education. Let me start I'm a sole parent. Yet I can think of many, many parents who are not looking for us. They want tradition. And there is many a school there. And again, there's nothing, we are not against tradition. We are just not it. We are not for or against it. I always like to say that we are not trying to say that traditional education, traditional schools, that we have 300-year-old. I think the average age of independent schools in Massachusetts is what, 75 camp? It's like very, very, I still remember when I came to NEIA, that was one of the first questions I asked. You decided to start a school in Massachusetts. I think per capita in the world, there are not as many great independent institutions as they are here. And that's what I want to say, is that it's not that we have got anything against tradition. It's just that we are not it. So we are not a school for everybody. There is a certain kind of family that chooses NEIA, right? And I will tell you this, John, and it's a different generation of people. So it's either you went to traditional education and you didn't like it, or you went to traditional education, loved it, but you want something different because your kid is not you. We have grandparents who come and check us out and say, oh my God, this is what is needed now, right? Because entrepreneurship is not a new word. Entrepreneurship has been the buzzword in university level for maybe 20 years. And there are schools that are still struggling to teach entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial mindset in college because it was not taught in K through 12. It is not taught in K through 12. I think there's a handful of schools in the world that talk about innovation entrepreneurship. They might have an innovation entrepreneurship center where students might go and do a project. Like for us, it's embedded in our curriculum. You take it from 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. Right. And I think that's where, and Cam, please add to what I said to talk about, that's where we are different.
Yeah, I think that one of the major ways to think about it is that we have to communicate what we do. So, for example, we have open houses where people come and they want to check it out, and then we show what we do and explain it. It's those types of things that are really important to answering your question, John, about how do you get somebody into the school? It's that you got to obviously get them here for an open house sort of thing. But what I always say is once people get here and we can defend, I think anybody from a teacher, a leader, whatever, you should be able to defend what you do. And I think when we communicate, we need to be defending why this matters for a certain student. And to Durga's point, I like it a lot that it could be any number of reasons why a student is here. If you want to be an entrepreneur or you just want more of a progressive education, either way, what we like to communicate in our open houses and when we're defending what we do is that you will get that here. You will get these skills. You will get that foundation. And our college outcomes have been great. So we have proof of concept that way. But, we don't want to just hang our hat on it like, oh, look at this list. Like, come hear what we do. See what your students will do here. And that's sort of what is the major factor.
So you talked about, Durga, before that there are schools around the world or even in Massachusetts that have a center for innovation. So it's kind of like a sidebar and kids rotate in there and have their entrepreneurship moment, and then they go back into the rows. And I'm being very kind of, that's not a real reflection, but just kind of to make that comparison. Do you think a school that has a long tradition or schools that have been engaging in a kind of at the 12th grade with the exit ticket being the APs or the International Baccalaureate, or in many countries, the IGCSE, do you think it's much harder to embed this idea of innovation and agility in an iterative process than somebody like you, where you started 5 years from scratch and said, we're not going to have any of that? Because I think for a lot of schools, they do want to innovate, but those structures, those frameworks sometimes are very hard to shift. And do you think it's actually possible to innovate in a traditional school without having to have a sidebar center for innovation? Or is it really a matter of throwing everything out and starting from scratch?
No, I think I like the way camp always reminds me how NEIA was, because I ask these questions, and believe it or not, my head of teaching and learning has a document to explain it to me, right? Something has got to give. Camp, I thank you for always teaching me that lesson. Like, people can't say, I want A, B, C, D, E. I won't change anything in these 5, but I also want innovation or entrepreneurship or anything else, right? You want to suddenly teach bioengineering, or you want to teach underwater basket weaving, right? Whatever it is that you want to teach, what is going to get? It is a compromise, right? In the sense of, I like the way you started this podcast by saying, you have the 45-minute block or you have the 90-minute block. If you're not willing to change that, right? Because we don't have a 45-minute or a 90-minute block. Camp and his faculty members came with an entirely different block system. We have an entirely different cycle of classes that we do, right? We are not on a 3-day schedule or a 5-day schedule. We are on a 7-day schedule. We're thinking about a 10-day schedule. We're thinking about a 30-day schedule. So you have to sit down and be ready to make changes that might seem difficult. I always say it might seem difficult because we are doing it. Right? It is difficult. It is not easy, right? And it's the yes and, it's not yes but.
So the yes and, I think, is wonderful. And I'm wondering, you say it's difficult and it requires a certain amount of courage. But if you're already driving a bus that's somewhat a traditional school or that has years of structures and expectations and mindsets, to suddenly start taking things away, that requires a lot of courage. And do you think that you were better positioned to do that because you were starting from scratch, Camp?
Yes, but John, you said a key word I say all the time on podcasts like this: courage. And I know that a lot of your listeners, if they're in education or even not, if they're parents looking for schools, that one aspect of any school, if you want change, if you think you should be more innovative or have more entrepreneurial mindset or whatever, you have to have the courage to start small. Like, yes, we were able, I say this all the time, like, we were blessed with the fact that we could be a new school and start these things and work on them and iterate. But I've been at independent schools my whole career, and you can do that. You can do those things. You have to have the courage to look at them and be agile enough within that structure to make those changes. So, I always think of Heidi Hayes Jacobs' points, like, what is sacred, what can be amended, and what do you get rid of? You should be thinking about those questions all the time, whether you're a 5-year-old school or a 250-year school. And if you have leaders and students who are willing to think that way, then you can absolutely make a change. It takes the courage, though, to have that type of thought. And so I think it can definitely be done on whatever scale you want to have happen, but get the people together who are willing to be courageous and step up and make that happen.
So you talk about this idea of courage. So Durga, you got hired as a new head. I'm sure there are teachers that move on or retire. What is when you're looking for people to come and join your community, not the students, but the faculty and the people that are working there, what are some of the key components that are non-negotiable that maybe somebody that comes from an independent school or public school might not expect to have to deliver?
Durga, maybe I'll start talking from a teacher end. You can talk about like a leader end. From a teacher standpoint, people we want to come teach here, they have to have an innovative mindset, like we started this episode talking about. You need to have that. You can't be here and not want that, or not be unwilling to be flexible. That's one of our questions in our interview process, is like we expect our staff to be flexible, et cetera, et cetera. I had an interview one time with a potential math teacher, and this was just in the phone screen aspect, and I was like, if I walked into your class on a Tuesday afternoon, what would I see? And he said, well, I'd be up at the whiteboard teaching math. And I was like, yeah, but like, what else would I see during that class? He's like, I'd be at the whiteboard teaching math. And I was like, okay, end of that interview, right? That's not what we want. We want people thinking about, I always say New England Innovation Academy isn't just our cool makerspace. It isn't our entrepreneurship. It's everything, as Durga mentioned at the beginning, that we should be thinking all the times as teachers, how do you innovate? How do you innovate teaching Hamlet? How do you innovate teaching polynomials? Those types of things matter. That's the mindset we need a teacher to come here to do.
So, Camp, on that, if the teacher doesn't have the mindset but has the growth disposition and is keen to, is that good enough, or do you need to have them to describe that mindset for them to be able to go further?
No, because as we know, John, as we talked, like most people are at traditional schools. Most people are in the box. That's what I always say. And so there are a lot of people who might feel like have that growth mindset and they want it. And so, yes, we have to welcome those people in, and in that case, they're ready to be mentored. They're ready to swap ideas on how it is to innovate, biology or something like that.
Thank you. Durga.
And on the staff side, I think I look for people who are courageous, but not in the variety of, they say, oh, I can deal with anything. I think people who are very keen on changing, but not for change's sake. People who've gone through change management. People who have this enthusiasm for new things. Because you can't come to NEIA, and this, again, we are a startup, we are growing. You need to be excited about growth, right? Because a lot of times in the very traditional mindset, people will come in and they'll be like, oh, I know it all. Like, I know how to make you better. It's the most dangerous thing that somebody can tell me. And I'll never forget, in my interview, they said, what are you most afraid? And I asked the question back. I said, they asked me, what am I most afraid of? And I still remember saying it. I'm afraid because these are children. And I'm responsible for children who are sent from all over the world, and I have to take care of them, right? That was something that I had to. And if you don't have any fears, if you're not worried at all, if you feel like you have all the answers, right? It is not the startup, because it means that you know the answer. You're not thinking of trying something and you're ready to fail and then try something else. Right? So that failure forward is very important to me. And I see that as an entrepreneurial mindset.
Is that also then important for the students? So when you are from year 6 grade, 6 to 12, and when parents come, with international schools and private schools, there often can be kind of a gate that you have to get through. So you're interviewing the parents as much as they are. Are you a school that is selective in what kind of students get to come?
Yes, and I'll let Camp explain.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the same way that we talk about teachers and staff, a student needs to want this type of education. And so as part of the process, we love shadow days. Like, some schools will be like, on November 20th, we'll have a shadow day. We have a shadow day whenever a student wants it. If you want to shadow NEIA, you can come see what NEIA is like, because that's what matters, right? We want somebody to actually see what this school is like. So that's definitely one way. As part of our interview process, like one of our questions to students is, if you could create a school, what would be the 5 factors that matter to you? And it's not surprising. They're not like, I want to sit in rows and take standardized tests, right? So that's sort of what we're striving for.
So you also, as you're talking about the structures and the people coming and the way you're engaging people in those conversations and making decisions of different stakeholders coming in, what is it like when other schools in the area or universities, and you said you're competency based, you don't have grades, how are you had to do you have to explain yourself, or do you have like a little disclaimer on the transcript? I'm just curious, because I know some universities, and I'm just using one university I'm familiar with, is University of Santa Cruz, California, definitely moved to no grades. And I know they had some type of, I don't know, not algorithm, but there was some way by the comment equaled something, because they realized for some students going to graduate school or doctoral programs, the university is like, well, you have no grades, so it's going to be really hard to decide. So I'm wondering, how are you framing that as kids leave and they decide to go to universities, and universities is like, what is your GPA?
So great question. Our transcript does look like every transcript everywhere. So our competency system does translate. We've done the algorithm in-house so that our competency system does compute to a course grade, a course letter grade. So our transcript looks like everybody else's, so that you have a GPA. You don't have a college admission person like trying to read graphs or anything like that. Because I call it turn the page. Like, we wanted, probably the most traditional thing we do, John, is we have a transcript that looks like everybody else's. I think the courses we offer actually are definitely a little bit of a differentiator. But my biggest thing was, we want somebody in college admission to look at the transcript and be like, oh, this looks like every other transcript. I can see grades, and then turn the page. So I say we want them to turn the page and see the cool things a student has done here in pursuit of their passions.
So you both are super enthusiastic, and you definitely believe in the mission and what you're doing. What has not worked in the work that you've tried to do? What if you say, okay, we're going to innovate, and you're like, it's not going to work? And of course, we want to hear what works, but I'm just curious, what is something you suddenly realize this is not going to fly, and whatever it might be? I'm wondering if there's something.
We talk about it all the time, believe it or not. As I say this, continuous improvement is in everything that we do. And I think there is, at every level of NEIA, this question is happening. And I'll start, Cam, with our most recent conversation about, so we get all kinds of families that come to NEIA. We call ourselves NEIA. We don't say New England Innovation. We go by NEIA. You'll see it on his shirt. It says NEIA. So at NEIA, we get all kinds of families. Even when we get the most enthusiastic families that want an education that is different than traditional education or what they are used to, because they see something different about NEIA, and our community is fantastic, there's still questions exactly the way you asked, you said in the beginning, John. They're like, but are you teaching calculus? But are you teaching this thing in science? Or how many different ways is my child being challenged? Or what is my child reading? Because they go back to what they know, right? Because that's what you know. You might also have 2 kids in 2 different schools that are having 2 entirely different experiences. And suddenly you're questioning, is one better than the other, even though your children are completely different? And so we are still, it is the constant education of the families, not just the kids, right? Because I think our students understand better what we do because they are in it. They're in it for 8 hours of the day. They know what's happening in class. But not all children translate what's happening in school to the families,
No,
right?
definitely not.
I say this as a mother. When I ask my child, how was school today? I get a one-word answer, or I'll even try to be very specific, or I'll try to be open-ended. You always get it was fine. It was good. Whatever. Meh, right? How do you take that? Because all the parent is seeing is the syllabus. They're not in the classroom. So how do you still let your families know that the kids are getting a world-class education, that we are truly preparing them with the diversity of thought and the diversity of experiences, right? We are teaching them the entrepreneurial mindset. We are teaching them how to be creative, how to be innovative, right? How to self-advocate. They've got so many different nuances in our education that the parents don't know because they are not in the classroom. They're not in the conversations. Camp has almost a weekly, he gets all the department chairs together, right? And they're constantly iterating, but people don't know what happens in the background. So I think that is, and I say this as a newcomer because, believe it or not, when things go wrong, it is the head of school's fault. I don't know if you know this or not. I would like to say this in public. When anything goes wrong, it's usually my fault, even though I'm on month 5, right? And I take full ownership of it because this is my team. This is my school. These are my people. And I have great pride in the work that they do. But we have been recently talking about how do we then let our parents understand what's going on?
Yep.
Yeah, I got a great example for something that didn't work, and it's rooted in sort of how we think. So when we started, first 2 years, we partnered. We love partnerships too. That's something most schools won't do. We partner with different programs to create more flexible options for our students. But anyway, we partnered with a prestigious university. They were teaching a very innovative way to teach language, and we're like, that's awesome. That's what we're all about. So it included like teaching with a certain method in class, but then also doing, then the students also had online drill sessions with college students who were doing those drill sessions. And it didn't work for a 7th grader. It didn't work for a 9th grader. And so we had to come to the hard realization like, wow, we thought that was cool and it might work at a college level, but it doesn't work for a 6 through 12 school. And so we had to change and then put in our own language program. But it's a good example of, we thought it was a great idea. It was innovative and we loved it. And then in practice, we're like, oh, that's not serving our students the way we want. And we're like, we got to take that loss and now move on.
Yeah, and I think you also talked about that, Durga's fail forward. That's something that you both really are committed to. So you talk about not being traditional. Let's just imagine I'm kind of a little drone because they're really popular right now, and I get to follow a child. I don't care what grade. What does a day look like differently than, say, a day where the bell rings, I go to first period, second period, I might go to science, I might go to physical education, I might have a study hall. Basically, it's kind of a mix of different courses. I'm going to different rooms. How is and the bell is kind of the driver, it's 45 minutes, 90 minutes, 50 minutes, and the day is really divided and there's a lunch break. You say you're not traditional. What does that day look like for a child? What is so different that a child's going to experience? Because if I'm a kid that's gone through this bell system with periods and different topics, and suddenly I come to you, am I going to feel completely disoriented, or is it set up in a way that there's some reference point, but it's still very different?
Yeah, if you looked at our schedule, you'd be like, oh, that's a traditional school, because it's sort of shaped, the shell of it is shaped that way. But like you said, if you were traveling through the day, you'd go to integrated math and you'd learn how sort of algebra and statistics are being swirled rather than we're drilling geometry right now for the next 7 weeks, that type of thing. Part of our schedule too is we have an all-school morning meeting every day, and during the midday blocks we often have sort of group meetings. Sometimes kids are like, why are we meeting so much as groups? But like, that's important. The concept of belonging and togetherness is an important element to any school, and we have that built into our day. So it's sort of like Durga said about if you're not in the day-to-day, you might be wondering like, what is actually going on? But like, we're not crazy that you show up into school and you're like, it's just a free-for-all all day. You have classes, you go to your classes, you go like at set times and things like that. But what you do in there, that's where the innovation is.
So that is also something that you brought up as you highlight this, is this idea of dispositions. You both mentioned that it's not about tech tools or anything, or you said it's about everything, but those dispositions. And those dispositions are, I assume, being taught, right? You have these assemblies, the group meetings.
Yeah.
Is there an overarching philosophy that you have taken? There are Society of Friends schools, Quaker schools, there are Mennonite schools, there are a lot of different schools. There are schools that follow the IB, there are the schools that follow the AP. Is there an overarching philosophy or disposition that you are kind of connected to, or is it something that's more organic that you're creating as you move forward?
You should talk about PIN.
Yeah. We sort of believe in the concept that's built into our mission of a student's passion and purpose. So things they're interested in, their reason for doing that. And then we call it a PIN, P-I-N, and the I is ideas to impact. Like you have a good idea, especially as a designer. So you have a good idea, but like, what's that serving? What's the impact of that other than maybe just for yourself or just to be something cool? And the N in the PIN is to be ready for what comes, quote, next. So in other words, yes, we want you to be present. We want you to be happy in school. And we actually believe our students are very happy. I think that's a cool thing. If you came into school, you'd be like, oh, kids seem happy. They're not super stressed. But you also have to have an eye on what comes next. And we don't look back traditionally wise. We look forward. Like, okay, what are the skills what are the jobs we don't know yet? Those types of things. We're really trying to harness on those types of skills that are transferable to whatever a student's going to take on next.
How much do then the kids, you talked about the kids in the PIN model, that they have some agency. How much agency do kids have in this iterative process and also in those conversations? Because of course you have, 12 to 18-year-olds. Is it kind of a sense that their voice should carry as much, or their voice should be a part of it, but there really is an overarching structure that's guiding them?
A framework. I don't want to say I'd use the word framework. We all act within that framework, and I consider it a very growth mindset framework. And I will be very honest with you. I have had a 6th grader's mother ask, so my kid needs to have a passion and my kid needs to have a purpose, and I'd be like, no. I said all they need to do is have an open mind, because that's what we are teaching. We are asking them the right questions where they figure out what their passion and purpose is, right? And I love the way you talked about idea to impact, and this whole thing about human-centered design comes right there. Like, why do you want to create something? Who are you? What interests you? What doesn't interest you? There is definitely more structure for the younger age kids, because it's nobody at NEIA is just running around freely. Yes, they do it during recess, but they're not just running around freely, willy-nilly, creating their own things. No, I think there's definitely a framework, and I call it the framework for innovation and success, keeping in mind creativity. Right? Creativity, asking the right questions, inquiry, right? I think there's a lot of the Socratic method that comes in where we help them figure out answers. We don't tell them the answers. We don't give them the answers. And somebody who I love and adore at NEIA, she's now our head of community life. She'll always talk to us about advocacy. We don't have advisory at NEIA. We have advocacy. And our advocates are people who walk alongside our students. We don't lead them. Right, we are partnering with the students. Right, we are creating that mentorship, the guidance, the scaffolding framework. Right, we're not letting them just jump off a cliff. We're telling them, hey, that's a cliff. What do you think we should do now? Right, that I think that's where NEIA's strength lies.
You also both said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have exams. You're not exam driven, right? To get out of your school, you don't have to do an AP or an IB, that it's really through the competency-based skills and then this algorithm that you've created. So when you go to university, was that a deliberate decision to get away from quizzes and exams? And is it more project-based learning, problem solving, kind of, design thinking? Was that kind of, as you founded the school, you said, we are not going to have exams?
So what's interesting is you can have exams. So we just had a period called what we call deep days, and it's based on a traditional exam week, right? So each class has a 2-hour block during that week. In a traditional school or a traditional exam period, right? Like everyone who takes English would all be in like one area having an exam. We don't do it that way. If a teacher wants to give an exam during that 2-hour block, they should do it if that's how it's going to move the class forward. If a teacher wants to have a project, if a student wants to do presentations. So we always say, we assess with competency so that the assessment method doesn't matter. It can be a quiz, it can be a test, it can be a presentation, it can be a project. It can be any of those things as long as you're articulating what competencies are being done. So therefore, like, we don't have an exit exam, like an IB exam or anything like that. But we do have tests, we do have quizzes, we have essays, like all the like types of things. We just don't standardize that everybody has to be doing X, everybody has to be doing Y. Yeah.
So it's like those deep dives is, here are different ways you can assess. You pick which one makes most sense for your group of kids or what, your teaching style.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I want to give an example because Deep Days was last week, and my absolute favorite math teacher was having her calculus class, and they looked a little bit stressed out. But it was not one kid and one kid. They were not sitting in an exam. They were sitting around a table, 3 tables of 4 each. Okay, this is a high-level math class. But they looked a little bit worried. And she was just walking around, and then she had walked out because somebody wanted to ask her a question in person about something that they were doing. And I walked out and I said, exam? And she said, no, I just gave them some questions that they would like to work on. And then they have to present the answer. So they were doing 3 separate problems, and then they were going to present the answer, and they were going to teach each other about 3 concepts that they had already studied during the semester. And it was fantastic how they were sitting. It taught them teamwork. It teaches them resilience. They are being assessed in what they have already studied. And then she's going to assess them based on not just the problem solving, but also the presentation skills in the class.
Nice. You are a small school, right? You started 5 years ago. You're growing. How many of you are out there? I mean, is there an organization like there's the, independent schools organizations, and in international schools, we have the CISA, Central East European Schools Association. We have ECIS. There are a lot of organizations of like-minded people. Is there an organization for schools like yours that are Innovation Academy? I'm just thinking of San Diego Tech High, which is another one that often gets a lot of traffic. I'm just curious, is there an organization? Are there a group of you, or are you really kind of a solo act in your area of that world?
It's so funny. Durga and I were just literally talking about that today about another school. And there isn't like a New England Association of Independent Schools, right? There's not the USA Association of Cool Innovative Schools, but there should be, right? So like, I think because this concept people are still rooted in the tradition. So we need to get to a point where there is that, so we can riff off each other more frequently, other than like sometimes we have to go out and search that. But I think, yeah, you bring up a good point of like, that's lacking in the sort of academic marketplace right now, that type of association.
You said that, there are not many schools like that, and we're still steeped in tradition. We all know, and if you look at any company, modern companies, innovation and agility and iterative process, design thinking, design sprints, all these words I'm throwing out are kind of, in many organizations, standard. I mean, you can't actually survive in the marketplace as it is today without being able to kind of create something very quickly that's meaningful and purposeful and also sellable. Why are we still having these conversations, you as a unique entity and not the norm?
That's a great question. I think it is the courage to make big changes. There's also the thing of, if it is working, why break it? Again, we come from 1,000 years of tradition in a way. You go all the way back to whether you're talking about the university model or the school model. This is how I love it that people still say, this is how we have always done it. And believe it or not, even in a school that is in its 5th year of existence, I have heard it so many times in these past few months. Oh, that's how we always did it. And I always go, you mean for the past 4 years? So that's a good reason. I sometimes we think that when we go into that dangerous zone, we need to actually take a couple of steps back and be like, okay, let's re-examine what we just said to ourselves. Maybe that is enough reason to make that change, because maybe you're not going in the right direction. And it's time consuming. I will actually say that just because of the amount of work I see my team do. I always say that I sit in that position of privilege where my job as head of school is to support the amazing work that is being done in the classroom by our teachers and by the academic leadership, that and then the support staff that comes through our boarding program. Like, it's my role is just the support role, but I see the way we are creating this change, and it is a lot of hard work. And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of people like Camp to not let people slip back. So him and his team, that's their job, right? You have to remember, you have to be conscious to not slip back into things the way they were, because sometimes the way they were is easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea, and what you're really highlighting for me, is this idea of it's a discipline. It's a commitment. And even when you're at low ebb, low energy, you just have to keep going. And that really requires the energy and time that you're highlighting. Camp, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have to look in the mirror a lot of days and be like, you got this, buddy. Come on, dude, get the energy. You got to do this. So I would say that, I'm sorry, what was the original question? I lost myself on.
It's just the idea, why are there not more schools like you?
So I think that a major factor in that, John, is because of parents, and they want what's best for their children. And what they, like we said it earlier in this episode, they go to what their experience was. And they're like, oh, well, I went to a good college, so therefore we should keep doing this. And so in that, like, oh, it's not broken, so we don't need to fix it, but we do have to fix it for children. Like, I'm mind blown that our education system is still the way it is. And schools like us are having the courage to make changes. That's why I think every school should have courage to make changes, because it's just so necessary. The inertia of that, and I really do believe a lot of it is about fear of you're a parent and you want your child to be successful, and you see success as that traditional path, actually. So it's this sort of grind where we want to be able to be doing, like, thank you for having us on, because we want people to hear, like, hey, we're out here doing what we believe is best for all students.
Absolutely. No, and I think your point is a really important one, is that, parents, especially when parents are paying out of their own pocket, it's a big financial commitment. And, all private schools are expensive, however you look at it. And so I think, it's almost like you're making a bet, and you want to make sure the outcome is really positive. Yeah. Thank you, both of you. It's been really so interesting hearing about your school. What we like to do as we wrap up is, what is maybe something you would want people that are listening, that are maybe thinking, maybe we could do something little innovative, or schools that maybe are really fearful or might need some help in getting that courage? What is something that you would want to share with our audience as they start thinking? And I want to remind our audience, please go to the show notes, because there you can link to the school and both of our guests' LinkedIn, because I'm sure that will be a nice way. And I know that if you reach out, or even if you're in the area, you can do one of these shadow days, which sounds so much fun. But what are some parting thoughts that you would want to invite people to consider, kind of as an encouragement, or schools that maybe are starting on this journey?
Durga, why don't I go first, so you can wrap up as sort of head of school? That one thing I would say to anybody out there in any occupation is you're going to have fear. You're going to need courage, and there's going to be the people who push back against that because of traditions. And that's okay. That's all part of the process. It's all part of your own learning process as you build something, but it's doable. And if you consider, like we think all the time, we put the student at the center. If you think about what it is that you're really serving, and if that matters to you, keep driving, keep pushing. That's what matters.
Thank you.
I'd say that it's a culture. It's a culture change. As head of school, I see that when you say that you want to make that bigger change, and we talk about courage, it's a culture. And so sometimes it is incremental, and sometimes it is ripping off the Band-Aid, getting all of your leadership team together and saying, we are going to do this, right? And then bringing the flock along with you. And again, have your North Star. For us, it has been the student experience. It has been extremely being future focused. We don't shy away from anything that comes our way, whether it is AI or cybersecurity or data science or entrepreneurial thinking or design. Like thanks, Cam, for saying that. We get up every day and we have to reaffirm who we are, and that's what you've got to do to make the change. And it can be done.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your enthusiasm and your passion, and also spending some time in us kind of exploring this idea of innovation. And I really hope for our audience that some of you will reach out and even consider some of the approaches that you both have created. And Camp, what an amazing journey that you've been part of. And Durga, how exciting for you to come from higher education and now be there. And you've drunk the Kool-Aid, that is for sure, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But I want to thank both of you really for being part of this conversation. And I want to remind our audience, do reach out. Look at the show notes and spend some time on the website, because I think there's some really interesting ideas, and it's something of a unique situation. And I think sometimes it's good to have an exemplar or a point of reference as you yourself, as educators or a school or an organization, think about what innovation means and what are the cultural dispositions that you have to engage with. Both of you, Camp and Durga, thank you so much. And to our audience, always thank you for your comments and feedback, and also people reaching out and saying, hey, I have a great idea, or I'm doing this. We're always looking for people to be part of these conversations. Very much look forward to seeing everybody next time. And thank you for your continued support with our LinkedIn. Thank you both again, Camp and Durga.
Thank you, John. Yep, thank you.